Okay, thank you everyone for coming on today. Really appreciate it. We are going to be talking about designing inclusive play environments for Green Acres and Jake's Law. So, what we were just talking about prior to this starting was how this may apply to schools, to YMCA's, to community centers. So, the information that we're going to go over today is all good information. Yes, will we talk about Jake's Law and Green Acres? We will, but this can apply to any inclusive play area that you're thinking of building or designing. So please stay tuned. If you have a question, there is the chat that you can always put a question in the chat, or at the end, we're going to open it up if you want to ask a question out loud. So you can do that. You can just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Today, we are very fortunate to have some people, Jenny Summerall and Bill Botten from GameTime Playcore, their core Center for Outreach, Research, and Education, which is committed to sharing validated research and building informed advocacy to help empower communities to create great play, recreation, and open spaces. They curate, translate, and share evidence-based research from a growing network of scholars through resources, high-quality professional development services, and data-driven support to help local advocates build healthy communities. So if you guys have ever sat in on one of these with us before, Jenny is fantastic. Bill is fantastic. So I think you're in for a good ride. So if you do have questions, like I said, please put it in the chat, or at the end, we're going to ask, we'll take off the mute and let people ask questions. So thank you very much. Matt?
So the Jake's Law is a grant opportunity through Green Acres, and when we're talking about design, there's 7 premier or bullet points that need to be hit on the design. For you're not just looking at 1 or 2 of these; you do have to hit all 7. And what Jenny and Bill talk through for the next hour is really going above and beyond what is required here. But just at a quick glance, accessible parking is required. Unitary accessible playground surfacing, so we're talking rubber, turf, tiles. If you are providing restrooms, there needs to be a family or assisted use toilet room. That includes a changing table for children. 20% of your playground area or unitary surface area needs to be shaded, whether that's natural or man-made or through a playground shade. Fencing does need to be around the perimeter of the play space. And again, Jenny's going to really dive into this, but play components that address the physical, sensory, cognitive, social, emotional, imaginative, and communication needs. And finally, a quiet play area is provided somewhere on the play space. So I'll turn this over to Jenny and Bill, and they'll really dive into this for us.
Jenny, I guess I'll go first. I'm very happy to be with you all. My name is Bill Botten. I served for more than 20 years on the U.S. Access Board and helped write minimum accessibility requirements for both play areas and recreation facilities. And Jenny, you want to introduce yourself now?
Sure. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. We work in Playcore, Center for Outreach, Research, and Education Department, as service arm of Playcore. So Playcore provides a broad portfolio of program services and innovative products. We work closely with GameTime and MRC, so with Keith and Matt and their team on really turning research into practice. And so at Core, we start with third-party research and a scholarly network of just experts in the industry. And we're so pleased to partner and call Bill a dear friend of ours. He joined our team after retiring and has just really, really elevated how we think as a company beyond just designing playgrounds, but just in every aspect of what we do, from training to special events. So Bill is just one of many scholars, but one that is truly, really near and dear to our heart. So we're excited that he was able to join us today. And from there, we develop all kinds of resources. So you're going to hear about some resources later that we are going to get to after the webinar. We do a lot of events. We do about 100 professional development events a year, and inclusion is always something that we enjoy talking about the most. But the purpose of today is really to share with you some of the evidence-based design best practices that GameTime and MRC and Playcore really align with, to create truly inclusive environments for people of all abilities. And so my background is as a special educator. I taught children with moderate to severe disabilities here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, for many years before joining Playcore in 2008.
Next slide. So just moving forward here, again, we want you to consider in your designs. And for me, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. I'm a person that uses a manual wheelchair and have used a manual wheelchair now for more than 40 years as a result of a motor vehicle accident where I wasn't wearing a safety belt and was ejected from the vehicle. And so I was the parent at the playground in the chair. I didn't have the play value, but the interaction, the ability to be a part of what was going on, or if my child fell, or the ability just to get into the play area was a real issue for me more than 25 years ago. So the idea is who's being excluded is how I would hope that you could look at this, and not necessarily that you're meeting these minimums, we're going beyond the minimums, but to think about all the populations and those 7 principles that were required in Jake's Law start to get us to some of those. And we're going to go into a little bit more description on some of those elements and hopefully provide you some thought process of thinking about, let's make sure that everyone gets to participate, young to old, persons with it or without disabilities. So my next slide talks about those minimum requirements. And when we say minimums, we're talking about on Title II facilities, state and local governments, anything public, non-federal, or private, has a requirement to comply with the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design that do include minimum requirements for play areas and 7 other recreation type facilities. And so this would be where you would start to try to find that minimum requirement for even the toilet bathing and parking, the things we're going to talk about. But just remember that all new construction and alterations after March 15th, so for the last 12 years, all recreation requirements have to comply. Recreation facilities need to comply with the 2010 ADA standards. Now, you won't find every facility listed here. You're not going to find a skate park, a dog park. You're not going to find certain features or recreation type facilities, maybe a disc golf course. But remember, the overriding obligation of this civil rights law is that persons with disabilities have the right to have access to your programs, your services, and your facilities that are accessible to, but most importantly, usable by people with disabilities. Next slide. As a person with a disability, the first thing I think about is how am I going to get there, right? And can I get there from where I can drop a ramp off my vehicle, or if I'm coming on a bus, I'm coming on a sidewalk? Think about accessible parking in that it is just a minimum. Exceed that. Remember, there's 2 types of accessible parking, and I'm not calling it handicap. I'm not calling it another word. We're calling it accessible parking. Okay. We want to try to get that word handicap out of the terminology or on your signage. We want to think about, we're providing opportunities for persons with disabilities. Anytime you talk about somebody with a disability, it's always important to say people first, right? It's a person that uses crutches, a person that uses a wheelchair, a person that's blind. And we're talking about accessibility. So this would be accessible parking. We want to do better than the minimum. Okay, we want to do more than that. I'm showing you here a car space that has a 5-foot access aisle. A van space has an 8-foot access aisle. And so providing additional space and opportunities. Most recreation facilities, if you go there on a weekend, are full, right? And the accessible parking is at a premium. If I can't find that accessible parking, I may not be able to visit that location. Think about not only your surface parking lots, okay, that need to be firm and stable. We don't want to see gravel in the accessible parking unless it's severely compacted. The requirement would be firm and stable for any part that a pedestrian or a person in a mobility device would be using. On-street parking, Jake's Law requires that if you're going to do on-street parking, it requires a curb ramp. The curb ramp would want to be somewhere close to where that accessible parking is and not force people to run down the road to the corner, right? You'd want a mid-block, or you'd want to make sure that either that or your accessible parking was placed up near the corner so you had access to that curb ramp right away. So look at the proximity of where you're placing these site arrival points from those elements that we're trying to give everybody an opportunity to participate on. Next slide. We're calling it pathways, but really we're talking accessible routes. The 2010 ADA standards requires at least one accessible route to each element space required to be accessible, at least one. We want that route to coincide with the common circulation path. We don't want to send persons with disabilities one way and then everybody else goes a different way. We want the family unit, friends and families, the whole class to be able to participate and walk to that location together. So common circulation path, part of the accessible route, at least one 36-inch route that's firm and stable. Think about how we're going to provide that route to connect to each one of these elements or spaces on the site. In a play area, it's a percentage of the ground level and a percentage of the elevated play components have to be connected by that accessible route. Outside the play area, it's a 36-inch minimum route. We're hoping you'll go bigger. We're hoping you'll go 5 feet to provide access for 2 people to pass. Remember, anytime you have a slope greater than 5%, it requires handrails and edge protection. You can always do edge protection where there's a fall or a drop off or things like that, and not do handrails as long as your running slope's not greater than 5%. Outside the play area, once your running slope exceeds 5%, you're looking at both handrails and edge protection. Next slide. Surfacing. The requirement is for unitary surfacing. That's going to mean this poured in place. It's going to be either tiles or it's going to mean a turf system. So when you're looking at these play areas, and why these specific types of surfaces are called out is, first of all, we want to exceed that minimum size, right? We don't want to just connect those accessible play components with a 5-foot wide accessible route using this type of surface. We want the whole play area to be inclusive. One thing my kids always knew when I was in the play area is how long my arm was, right? Tell them to come over here. If I couldn't get to them, the surface material was different. There was a timber that held in the engineered wood fiber, whatever. They knew how long my arm was. That's how young kids will play tag too. They'll know exactly where the person with a disability or that's using a mobility device cannot get. We want the whole surface to be either unitary tiles or a turf system so that the whole surface allows the parent, the caregiver, or the child to interact in the whole surface area. Next slide. The next thing we think about those unitary surfaces right here, synthetic, here we're showing a picture of the tiles, the poured in place rubber, and you can use that bonded rubber too. When bonded becomes a very accessible surface. I've used that a lot where there's outdoor fitness equipment. It seems like they like the bonded rubber and can be very accessible. Next slide. So site amenities, we don't want people to just come and think they can only use the play area, right? If we're providing other amenities at that facility, we want it to be inclusive. We don't want to have somebody have to leave to go to the bathroom when they're at the park, right? We want them to be able to participate and be there the whole day just like everybody else. So here I'm showing you a bench. The idea with benches is that a percentage of your benches should provide a clear space adjacent to the bench so somebody can sit next to you. This is a really unique bench here that is multi-leveled, that allows a person with a mobility device to even use the bench as a work surface or a dining surface and sit with people. Most people that are using a mobility device are not going to transfer to your bench. That's why it's so important to have a space. And we're talking about a 36-inch wide by 48-inch deep space somewhere near the end of the bench that a person with a mobility device could park. Now, we all know that benches can offer greater opportunities for people with disabilities if they have a back and an armrest, right? The standard does not require, the 2010 ADA standard never requires outdoor sitting benches to comply with anything right now. Okay, other than on federal land, there's a requirement for a bench along a trail to provide a certain number of them to provide this area wheelchair space near the bench that doesn't obstruct the route to the bench. So I'm going to encourage you in your public spaces, in your parks, to make sure that individuals with disabilities can sit near those that are enjoying those benches. And again, backrests and armrests definitely do aid in that opportunity for people to get up or sit for a longer period of time. Next slide. Site amenities such as picnic tables. So important to make sure that you get as many of these tables accessible as possible. Typically with dining surfaces, the 2010 ADA standard says 5% no less than 1. We're hoping for all, okay? Purchase them all. Even if you can't get them on an accessible surface on an accessible route, provide the accessible table so that people with disabilities can participate wherever in that park, near the lake, near the pond, in the shade, under the trees, in a pavilion. So I'm showing you a table here, and when we talk about an accessible table, we're saying 27 inches to the bottom edge, 34 inches to the top, no higher, and 17 inches underneath the table that the feet and your knees can get underneath. 17 inches, okay? 30 inches wide. So if you had a 6-foot table, put an 8-foot top, you have an accessible space now on the end, okay? Do an 8-foot table, put a 10-foot top on it. So if you're ever replacing the tops, try to increase the size of the tops. Make sure people can get around them. The standard for picnic tables says a 36-inch route around an accessible table measured from the back edge of a bench. That's what we're looking for. If you have site amenities like these, make sure that they're either bolted down or staff that comes back to do the maintenance understands where they need to be placed so that they can remain accessible. Next slide. Here I'm showing you a shelter, and when I look at this shelter, I think, wow, I see an accessible table right off the bat, but I'm hoping that's not the only one. I'm hoping every one in there is an accessible table. It also has features like maybe a water hydrant, a drinking fountain, a trash can, a grill on an accessible feature like this. If this is one of your accessible pavilions, and I would advocate if you're doing picnic units, the first 2 are accessible, and after that's 20%. That's the minimum requirement currently right now on federal lands under the Architectural Barriers Act. Again, if you do not know, if these tables are not bolted down or chained down, you want your maintenance staff to have a chart to understand where these tables need to be put back underneath this pavilion to ensure that we have a minimum of 36 inches down the middle and around your accessible tables, right? We want to make sure they understand where to put them back after they've been used. Providing this opportunity for shade, whether it's natural or man-made, is part of the requirements, as you heard of Jake's Law. Many people don't have the opportunity to sweat. Maybe they carry a spray bottle when it's really hot out to try to add that perspiration to their body. But having the opportunity to get into shade is so critical in most of your parks and recreation facilities. Next slide. Other site amenities that we talked about, the requirement was for a family or unisex toilet room if you're providing toilet facilities. I'm showing you a sign in this one. Identify where those are. Let people understand that we have an accessible restroom this way. I'm showing you a baby changing table on the left-hand side. That's one that if you put that in a stall or out in a toilet room, remember it's a work surface. The work surface is the same idea as I was telling you about that dining surface. We want the bottom edge no lower than 27 to the floor, no higher than 34 to the top, but that strap to reach it and pull it down needs to be no higher than 48 inches off the surface of the floor. So think about the extra features that we're providing. I'm also showing you a drinking fountain. Remember that you always have to have, when you provide a drinking fountain, you have to have a high and a low, okay? You don't have to provide drinking fountains, but when you do, you have 2 every time, outdoors, indoors. And a bottle filler does not replace either the high or low. It can be in addition to, but not in lieu of. One of the other requirements was for fencing around your play area. We did a really neat webinar this year on the park and play features that really support the opportunity for people with autism to participate. And one of the big key features was this elopement, right? The want to run or escape, and especially when your play or recreation facilities are near a pond, say, or a busy road. Great importance to make sure that you're fencing or providing a safe environment for everyone. Next slide. Minimums in the playground. Ground level play components is one of each type. I'm showing you a young lady here transferring to a transfer platform. So your ground level, you'd need an accessible route, 5 foot to one of each type. You have 6 swings, it's at least one. We're hoping you make it more than that. Unitary surface coming all the way. A transfer platform and transfer stairs is a minimum of 24 wide by 14 deep. And those stairs is you would leave your mobility device and transfer bumping, crawling, scooting up that elevated composite play structure to get to the elevated play components. And that's at least 50% of those. And if you had more than 19, if you had 20 elevated play components, it requires a percentage of your elevated play components to be ramped. Okay, so I encourage you to ramp more. One of the big issues I always had was I really can't transfer and scoot along a hard surface like this just because of the skin issues. So for me, it was always being able to participate as if I had a ramp so that I could get to that upper elevations in my chair and participate and chase and things like that. Think about more than one ramp. You think about how kids use an elevated play structure. They come up their stairs, they come up one way and they're leaving another, right? They're going down a slide, a pole, a climber, or something. Think about a child with a disability in a power chair or manual chair. They're going up and down the same spot. It's not as fun to play tag, or more opportunities to get on and off is really needed. I'm hoping that I stressed to you along this short presentation that we want to do better. We want to do better than the 2010 ADA standards. We want to go beyond those minimum to be fully inclusive. Jenny?
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, so Bill has taught me so many things, but he always says meeting the minimum accessibility guidelines is kind of like getting a C minus or a D even. And you're so fortunate to live in a state and in New Jersey to have this Green Acres program and Jake's Law that is funding truly inclusive playgrounds and thinking beyond not just the play area, but the full site. So this is super exciting, for you all to take advantage of this opportunity. The funding is just unbelievable, and you are going to be able to do really great things. So we want you to know that we're here every step of the way to help you with that process, working collectively with MRC and the designers and the sales associates there to be able to think beyond those playground minimums and these great site amenities. I mentioned earlier that my background is in special education. I got my master's degree in early childhood special education with a concentration in assistive technology and moderate to severe disabilities. And this is where it all began for me in 2000 when I was introduced to GameTime when we chose them as our vendor to work with them on designing an inclusive space at our school. And at the time, the industry really wasn't thinking about inclusion the way we do today. They were really just thinking about ramped structures. GameTime started working with us on designing products that are now pretty standard in the commercial play and recreation industry, like adapted swing seats, for instance. So this was just a fun picture as I was thinking back about my introduction into Playcore and play and recreation environments, and it really did start here. And we thought about this design with the designers at GameTime for a long time because we serve children of all abilities, and we wanted to be introducing different colors and textures. And you can see some of in the landscaping we use to create some visual cues and barriers. But this design process is wonderful because it does highlight some of the really key things that perfectly align with GameTime's design philosophy. So today I want to share with you a little bit of how Jake's Law and about our design philosophy really align so well together. As a teacher, one of the biggest things that families will always tell you when you ask them what they want, what you want to see from your child, or what is a primary goal for your child, it's typically not that they want them to walk or that they want them to talk or, to read. Most of my families simply would say to me, I just want my child to have a friend. I want them to have a deep sense of belonging and connectivity with their classmates or with their community. And if you look at this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that is so true. The Field of Dreams, I had a pleasure of visiting there this year with a team at MRC who created this incredible environment. And it's moments like these that when you have the opportunity to provide an inclusive destination to your community members that are just priceless, right? This is two families that are meeting each other for the first time and being able to have that sense of friendship and kind of break down those barriers, not just physical barriers to access the space, but the social participation is really the most important thing I think that these types of environments can provide. And so when we look at inclusion, yes, we're thinking about children, but we're also thinking about adults. So you heard Bill talk about being a parent, with triplets at his local parks. And so we want to think about even our active aging individuals who might be using assistive devices or even caregivers pushing strollers. Inclusion really thinks beyond just children. It's really about people of all ages and all abilities, and our ability as designers to create these fun and welcoming and universal spaces that are really encompassing of what it means to unite through the power of play and recreation. And in some cases, even our accessible playgrounds that are meeting those minimum requirements create a lot of exclusion and segregation for some individuals. And so the idea around inclusive environments is that it's more usable for more people to the greatest extent possible. So these designs that you will be working on with Jake's Law definitely will go beyond meeting those minimum ADA guidelines. You can see that some of those just require a transfer area, and a lot of times individuals prefer not to transfer out of their chair. That's their independence. But the idea is really to move beyond those minimum accessible guidelines. Universal design, we think about those with products, specifically how we create products that are designed for more people to the greatest extent. But also really thinking about disability as not a thing that a person has, but part of the natural human experience. And disability truly occurs, honestly, when there's a misalignment of what we are requiring somebody to do in the environment and their actual abilities. So we like to look at disability as really that natural human experience, but it is created when there's some unnecessary or unreasonable demands caused by the environment. So our goal is to reduce that requirement, make it more user-friendly, so that there is more of an alignment with a person's abilities. And again, these are spaces for all people, right? Not just individuals with disabilities, but all people. So you want to look at people's size, their stature. Bill was mentioning, even creating pathways that are wider so that two individuals using mobility device can easily pass one another and maybe not cause a traffic jam, right? So there's lots of ways that we can think beyond those minimum requirements. And lots of people out there are embracing the power of inclusion and thinking about inclusion. And that is what we love about Jake's Law and this opportunity. And so we hope that today you'll be able to kind of understand the philosophy that we use that perfectly aligns against with Jake Law, but we do use a design philosophy called the 7 Principles of Inclusive Playground Design. They are very specific to GameTime and Playcore, developed in partnership with Utah State University and their Disability Institute there. So this was a partnership that was created back in, 2007. And since then, we have funded independent research at our research lab there for, many years. Keith Richardson, who kind of runs this whole department, he is a landscape architect with a PhD in disability studies. He has just wrapped up his 4th research study with us around physical activity in individuals with disabilities. So we're always trying to learn more and understand how we apply best practices in our designs. And so the 7 principles are really the only evidence-based approach out there. And so working with you, we want to be able to meet all the Jake's Law requirements, but obviously also align with this third-party research to turn it into practice in your new destinations. If you look at who are children with disabilities, about 145 out of 1,000 children will have some sort of disability. And children receive special education services from ages 3 to 21 in the United States. And so if we just focus on physical, which is very important, we haven't necessarily met the needs of children with developmental or sensory needs or communication needs, for instance. And so we really want to look at every child and their unique abilities. So if a child has autism, they are going to be very unique. It doesn't mean that all children with autism will benefit from the same thing. And so really, when we start thinking about designing with this in mind, and again, not just with children, but also adults and even seniors and how this can benefit people, it really makes sense to start with thinking about the developmental needs of the whole child, and then thinking about how we relay that into the built environment. if you look at New Jersey data, often data really drives a lot of what we do. And so we're happy to work with you to provide you with very specific data. This is statewide data, but often it's nice to be able to really look at your specific area and understand where you are with the state average or the national average. And so you can see here what the state average is for in New Jersey for this is a social emotional health, physical health, diversity, equity, inclusion, in the environment. So we're able to pull some data for you to really help make that case, if you will, of why it's important to have an inclusive destination in your area. Maybe you don't have one within a 5-mile distance, or it's going to be your very first inclusive destination. But we have a whole team in our data service lab that can help you with any of this in your application process. So as I mentioned, the kind of design philosophy really starts with fostering the needs of the whole child. Again, our research partner at Utah State, this is the book that kind of outlines all the details that you would need to kind of know how MRC and working with their design team would work with you to design these destinations. All the destinations do get sent to me for another review so that I can make sure that it does implement this evidence-based approach. And when doing that, we like to recognize communities for their leadership, and they become part of our National Demonstration Site Network. So we'll talk a little bit about that. This is Keith. This is our research lab. They're right in the smack of the campus there. And again, it's been such a joy to work with him. He actually is a parent of a child with a disability as well. So he comes about this kind of research-based approach in a very unique way, and has influenced many, many landscape architects for years and years and years. So, so proud of this partnership with him. What we like to do is really start with looking at these 5 key areas of child development, which are physical, social, emotional, sensory, cognitive, and communication. You can see all the different subcategories there as well. So what we will do is work with you to select the right type of equipment that you're seeking, but making sure that we provide a robust variety within these 5 key areas for all children, including those with disabilities. From there, we will align the 7 principles of inclusive playground design. So if you see on your left, these are the universal design principles that are commonly used in indoor spaces for adults. And what Keith did was tailor these principles to meet the needs of children and outdoor environments. And that's why they start with the word be. Be fair included smart, independent, safe, active, and comfortable. This is what we want people to experience in your spaces. And the book has not only the kind of principle, but lots of different considerations and guidelines within each of those. And so we do have this nice little cheat sheet. And so you can rest assured when we are working on a design with you, as we're selecting very specific pieces that you might be interested in, we want to make sure that we are including these key areas within that playground design. And you're going to see it aligns perfectly with Jake's Law, things like those cozy spots, and as Matt mentioned, those developmental categories and things like dramatic play. You can see that with each component, it kind of addresses the primary kind of benefits as well as the alignment with the 7 principles. And this is helping you to ensure that we're maximizing that investment. When you get this funding, we want to make sure that you get the highest quality of inclusive playground design. We know that access does not guarantee inclusion, and so we take a very thoughtful and meaningful approach to designing each one of these destinations, and every one of them is unique. And we have lots of different fun products that can be included, and theming and things like that. So every single one of them looks and feels different, but all of our national demonstration sites that focus on inclusion will have these components, again, because it aligns with that research of what we know is important in these spaces. And so just real quick, I want to just share with you what are some of those latest findings that have happened at Utah State University, and why do we include these things? Because we know that it improves those play experiences for people of all abilities. So Be Fair is about equitable use, and we already talked about parking and surfing, some of the things that Bill already shared with us. But again, think about using color and even graphics to create some visual cues within that surface or even landscaping. So this really helps orient and really help the child understand the environment. We used a lot of color and texture in our environment at Siskin where I worked, so that it really helped children be able to navigate independently and on their own. Another thing that we like to address is music. Music is naturally inclusive, but also developmentally appropriate for people of all ages and abilities. And so you want to look for inclusion that kind of meets these nice reach ranges, but also you can see these were early kind of developments. My friend Gina back in the back there in the orange shirt, she kept dropping her mallet because she has some difficulty with her hands and fine motor control. And so our design team created these adaptive mallets, which are good for anybody to use, right? But especially for Gina, it gives that additional hand support. So those are the small details, I think, of specific inclusive products that are really kind of game changers when it comes to individuals and being able to interact and be independent as possible. Be included is going to be about choices and flexibility and providing variety. And we know children benefits from various types and forms of play. And the best way to do that is through dramatic play elements. This is that imaginative play that Jake's Law talks about. The research shows that children with developmental disabilities are actually playing at the similar levels of their peers that don't have disabilities when given the opportunity to engage in dramatic play. And so something simple like a steering wheel or a telescope may seem kind of like, to us, but it's very important, especially for a child that can easily recognize these types of events. It draws them into play with their peers. And that's what we want to see. So this is also a great opportunity to theme different pieces. You're seeing a blacksmith kind of area that was true to this area in Memphis, right down the road from me. But they wanted to recognize the heritage of a blacksmith in the area. And so they created this little fun blacksmith area. So you can do all kinds of, imaginative themed equipment as well. Here's an example of a boat to something like this, like a train station. So really the sky's the limit when it comes to theming. This is kind of my favorite thing to talk about is language, and the power of communication is so important. So there's opportunities to provide visual supports and communication pictures where children who aren't speaking verbally may point or eye gaze to these pictures. We have partnered with Boardmaker. We have a license agreement with Boardmaker, which is widely used for children that use picture symbols or augmentative communication devices. And so they're very familiar with these pictures. This gives the opportunity to also educate others that people communicate in different ways, right? But it also could be just ways to vocalize and engage in vocal play, like you see with these talk tubes. Principle 3, be smart. This is really about creating a smart and intuitive environment that makes sense, and also giving children the opportunity to show how smart and capable they are. So what the research shows is that these intuitive play patterns through circular designs, and even the opportunity to maybe go down the slide. This is one of my students, Tristan, to be able to do that activity again and again and again. That's naturally something that children are going to want to do. And so making sure they have the opportunity, as soon as they go down that slide bedway, what's the easiest route for them to be able to do that looping pattern again and again and again. So again, circular design, there's a lot of research kind of with this type of design philosophy to engage children of all abilities together. Another thing that we address with Be Safe is around jump-in points. We want children to feel emotionally safe and secure. And jump-in points are going to be small seats that are seated kind of adjacent to more social cognitive activities like dramatic play or music or games. And what the research is showing at Utah State University is that a lot of children will sit and watch and observe to gain confidence in play before they want to jump in and engage with their peers. So this is, again, drawing children into play. We're all about creating these social participation pieces between children of all abilities. And so seats around your playground on your structure, always a great idea. Really thinking about how we organize the environment so that there's opportunities for both passive play and more active play. So for instance, your motion and movement activities are probably going to be very, very active. And so you are trying to avoid that user conflict. So thoughtful design just about how we organize the environment. Be independent. We're thinking a lot about independence in these environments and really wanting to support navigation and participation. And ramps are going to be a great way to do that. And we want to make sure any part of the ramp structure is providing meaningful play experiences and that it's not just a ramp to nowhere, right? What are they going to do once they get there? And one of the things that is really important is to make sure that we have slide transfers so that as individuals that choose to leave their chairs or need to be assisted out of their chairs have a safe way to do that. And so slides that are accessible via ramp are going to have this little step here, and that helps somebody lift themselves up at the chair and onto that slide bedway, to things like these half play panels where a person using a mobility device can easily approach in a forward-facing way so their chair can go underneath it, and so that it's much more comfortable to engage in those play activities, as you kind of see this young man here with the telescope. So here are just more pictures of that slide transfer, how that works. Really something that we might not notice all the time on a playground, but something that's really important. We also know that height matters. Elevated accessible routes have been proven at Utah State to get kids engaged in higher social participation. So the higher they were getting on a playground, whether that was via ramp or using berms or different abilities to be able to do so, they were engaging more often the higher that they got. And it wasn't even super high levels, but what they've observed is that even in small increments, height truly does increase that social participation. And we want to think about ways that they're kind of even using those double wide ramp systems so they can easily pass each other or enter from different parts of the playground. If you are going to do different choices, thinking about height and getting to those decks at different levels using maybe a crawl tube or a different type of link climber that's easier than stairs. So you can see this kind of gives a choice. If you go off to the right, you're on a ramp, but if you go off to your left, there's kind of this link with handholds. So if somebody needed some additional support, but it kind of, again, gives that choice. This is a tower that has an accessible kind of climbing event so that, again, this is a child with a physical disability, but has the ability to use their arms. And this is much easier for him to be able to maneuver and get up to that higher level than maybe a set of stairs would be. The other things that, just to highlight here under Principle 4 is motion and movement activities and really addressing sensory. So when we think about motion and movement, that provides rich sensory feedback for vestibular, for our balance, and proprioception, which is really helping with motor planning. And what research shows is that inclusive features truly do make a difference. And so at Utah State, they have both of these seats, for instance, and the one to the left barely gets touched or used. Really, all the students are typically using the one with the high back and the handholds. And that is, meant for providing additional support. It's more universal. And so investing in these types of motion and movement activities is important. And then we also have all kinds of options where a child doesn't have to transfer out of their chair for whirls or rocking events. But these are the types of inclusive features we want to find. And also moments like this where we're providing intergenerational opportunities where families of all ages can come together. And this is, I love this picture because as a child kind of has that face-to-face opportunity, that's called attunement, and it develops a deep social bond between caregivers or friends. And so these are some of our favorite types of products to include. You want to provide tactile and opportunities for auditory and even visual support. And so there's all kinds of ways to do that through fun panels. One of my favorite innovations that I've had the opportunity to work on was an adapted switch technology on some of our panels. And so children own switches. There's a wide variety of switches. Parks don't provide these. They actually own these. But if you advertise that your new destination has panels that include switch adaptive technology so that families can bring their switches. This is a way that all the students I taught used a switch with their head like this. But these two individuals are using two different switches. And it can plug into the play panel, and then they're able to activate it and make that music happen. And it gives them a sense of leadership instead of being a passive bystander watching others press the buttons, they can actively participate. Nature is also important when we think about sensory, and it's, you know, one of the most inclusive things you can do is provide plants that are native to your area and really create some naturalization and natural loose parks. Be safe really thinks about that cozy spot area. And obviously we want to create very safe spaces as well, but those semi-enclosed areas away from a lot of the noise, what the research shows is that children will seek those out and are more likely to hop back into play once they've self-regulated. And so you want to definitely think about the location of these kind of cozy spots that are semi-enclosed, and Jake's Law does address that as a requirement. We heard Bill talk about supervision and shade and benches, really important for the safety to provide caregivers of all abilities, the ability to sit, watch, and observe, and to have those wheelchair spaces in the shade is also important, as well as the fencing. So that is a requirement for the safety with Jake's Law, is to have the fence in the area. Be active is going to talk about gradual levels of challenge. So these are spaces that still have climbing events and monkey bars and bouncing. People of all abilities can still enjoy those activities. And so we really think about how to make sure to provide beginning and intermediate advanced levels within the environment, so it's fun and enjoyable for everyone. This adapted climber has a transfer area and different sensors, so you can see that it's a beginning climber, really meant for that beginning challenge level to really engage in that upper body or maybe transferring out. Nets even now have some transfer areas so that child can get into the middle of that net space if they have the ability to use their arms. So these are the types of great products that we like to definitely incorporate. But if a child can't get out of their wheelchair, or let's say use monkey bars, there's other opportunities for accessible upper body and to engage in fitness with therapeutic rings or hand cyclers. And so really providing that parallel experience right next to each other that's equitable is you know, how we address that beginning, intermediate, and advanced for people of all abilities. Cooperative play is really great to engage children with and without disabilities. So think games or motion activities that the more people are using them, the more fun they are. And I love our shadow play here. You see it's just a shadow play flower that as children work at ground level, it creates this beautiful kaleidoscope of color. And then the last principle is be comfortable. And Bill did mention several of the different amenities. Jake's Law addresses many of those amenities as well. And, you know, we talked about shade, we talked about some of those key aspects, but one of the things, again, just to always consider is those appropriate reach ranges. And these half panels or half panels at ground level are really important. It's really hard for a child using a mobility device to use a panel from the side. And so we really want to incorporate these opportunities for that forward-facing approach at even if it's a talk tube or music. This is the type of way that people prefer to access those play components. And shade can be actually pretty fun these days. I love this picture because, you know, who would have thought, and look at this beautiful shadow that it creates. And I can imagine playing just even with that shadow. So shade can be kind of your standard roofs, but it could also be something unique and fun. So again, as we take these 7 principles and we kind of turn research into practice, we want to make sure that we include all of these in your outdoor environment while meeting all the requirements with Jake's Law. We're also happy to provide you with a site-specific overview. So when you work with MRC and you align with the 7 principles of inclusive playground design, we can provide you with an overview of all your site-specific kind of products and ways that we've addressed that, even showing images of your park so that when you go to your community or you want to be at the grand opening, you can showcase all the great ways that you've addressed inclusion. And I think this is just a great way to even educate people about how you've been very thoughtful about that design process. And so as we wrap up and leave time for questions here, I mentioned by aligning with the 7 principles of inclusive playground design, you will be recognized as a national demonstration site. And again, partnering with our scholarly partner on this, we're able to recognize communities that really want to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We know that there's ties to social emotional health as well as physical health. But as we align with you on your community needs and priorities, and we implement these 7 principles, there's lots of benefits of being part of this network. We provide lots of marketing support and ideas to promote your site. You receive free complimentary signage that you see there with a research QR code for people to give feedback about their site. And then our data service lab, as part of CORE, will provide 3 complimentary reports. One that comes at the very beginning before you're even opening about the community demographics. The second one comes 60 days after the opening of your event. So this is really, capturing what's happening at your site and the usage. And then the third report is based on those visitor outcomes and what they're sharing at your site. So this is just really awesome to think about as you embark on this journey to do an inclusive destination that, a year or so from now, that you would be able to share all the community health outcomes and really demonstrate the impact that this has had on your community. And so this is, again, something we are happy to provide you. There's no charge to this. It is just something that we know data really speaks volumes, and so that you can keep championing high quality parks in your community. We have over 1,000 national demonstration sites in our network, and we are learning a lot from these. We know that it's working to reach people of all ages, 3 age groups or more. Actually, 24% are considered intergenerational visiting these parks. So that's just awesome. We want these places to be for all ages. 98% are indicating that they're satisfied with their visit. Incredible. And 96% say they plan on returning to sites that implement the 7 principles. 90% are staying more than 30 minutes. And we know that there's great benefits for just even 20 minutes of activity. And they are self-reporting that 98% are active at the site. We can also tie this directly to health savings costs, both physical and mental health per year. And they are recognizing, the people that are coming to these inclusive playgrounds are recognizing that there's a tie to physical health and wellness, social emotional health, and they see these destinations as great public services. So again, inclusion matters. We are very passionate about inclusion, obviously, and just thrilled that to have the opportunity to potentially work with you all to create awareness and break down these barriers and foster friendships through Jake's Law. And so with that, I just want to remind everybody that MRC and Matt and team will follow up with you. We want to provide you with this full design book. We'll also be providing you some more information about our National Demonstration Site Network. To play together is my master's thesis. It's about 15 different activities that you can use to program inclusive spaces. Strong Foundations has a lot of resources about unitary surfacing that could be helpful. And then Bill created the Beyond the Minimums Disability at Park awareness resource that kind of talks through a lot of the amenities he talked about and different considerations to go beyond the minimum. So it's got a nice checklist that you can reference. Bill mentioned this, but again, I can't stress enough. He is so full of knowledge. So if you're looking to learn more, or you have staff that would like to learn more, you can check out our accessibility series that he did for us. We even featured Caitlin Partlow from Netflix series Love on the Spectrum this year. Again, that Disability Park Awareness panel was great, where they were talking really about opportunities to really expand inclusion for individuals who are neurodivergent or that have autism. So you can use the registration code GameTime, and you can watch those pre-recorded sessions at any time. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to kind of close us out, and then we'll have some time for Q&A.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, just to kind of tie this whole thing together with something local, a project that we were happy to be a part of, loved the project from start to finish, was the Field of Dreams in Toms River. It's a facility that when Christian and Mary came to us, they really pushed us on expanding our idea of inclusion, because they live it every day. So it's a facility that we would love to bring anyone on the call out to do a private tour of. Just let any of us know. We can schedule that. Christian is very accommodating to us. Even gave us a key to the facility so we can go in whenever we want. Next slide, please. So there it is. I know a lot of people, again, probably have seen it. It's a nationally recognized inclusive complex, not just for playgrounds, but for sports. It's just a place where the community come together and be one with everybody. The bottom there is just one thing I like to call out in the middle. That's the quiet corner. It's a little larger than most inclusive complexes that we've done, or inclusive playgrounds that we've done. But Christian likes to call that out when he does his tours, where it's a place that a lot of children go just to get away from the chaos of the playground for a little bit. Gives them the time to decompress a little bit and then get back into the play rather than having to leave. And the other thing, like I said, go through a list of other things aside from the playground. We did accessible bathrooms there with adult changing tables. The baseball field you can see in the background in the middle. That's not just for sports. Christian, something, again, I've never thought of until he brought it up. Something as simple as going to a pumpkin patch was something he couldn't do with Gavin, his son. So that they do a public pumpkin patch there in the fall. The pavilion, probably the largest pavilion we've built. Accessible amenities throughout. It has a charging station for power chairs. So they've kind of covered it all.
There's even a fitness area. I remember there was a great adult fitness area. So even
Yep.
for adult caregivers, yep.
And same thing with the miniature golf. It's a totally accessible miniature golf course. So again, Christian thought of it all, Christian and Mary. So it's something we really enjoy bringing people to, walking them through. And it usually sparks conversation about how we can mimic this in a smaller sense in other communities. And again, most people on the call likely know MRC, you know Game Time, but if not, we're based in New Jersey. We're in Seagirt. 6 of our New Jersey sales reps all live in the state. We'll travel the state, so we'll come to you, design your sites, measure your sites, and then come back to the office here where we have CAD designers, video renderers, and then partner with Game Time to utilize some of their design resources as well to create a design that really matches what you need rather than just picking a unit out of a catalog. We like to fit the space, fit the budget, fit the need, and just kind of circling us back to Jake's Law. Last year we worked with about 20 to 25 municipalities and counties. We were successful in getting them awarded on the program. So we would love to work with you guys individually to come out, schedule a meeting. We can do it on Zoom if that's preferred. Work on a design and then help get your application through to Green Acres before the February deadline. I just want to thank everybody as well. Any questions, we can jump into those now.
Yeah, and if you're working on any project currently with MRC, again, they will submit that to me to review, and I can provide with your application that overview of the 7 principles, that kind of matrix that's very site specific. So that's something we know a lot of people do utilize that to submit with their applications and to really highlight how they've thought through that design. So happy to be a resource for anybody within that kind of timeline of before February or after, so just make sure that you're utilizing us to support you in any way. So yeah, with that, any questions in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself. Let's see. I'm looking at the chat, Keith, but I don't know if you've already answered some of these.
We've answered some of them. One of the questions was where can we find more information on ADA? And Bill was nice enough to send a link out. There are a lot of different things that are focused on when you're outside of a playground. So for a building, it is a little bit different. But what that link that he sent details is everything. So.
And I would just keep encouraging people to go to education.playcore.com. Bill has a wide variety. For the last 2 years, he's done lots of different webinars on accessibility. So there's some nice training, again, that you can watch on your own time. But that would be another place to hear more from Bill.
Sue is asking, can we talk on a higher level about the Green Acres grant? Sue, we can. If you're okay, we can reach out to you directly. There's a lot of information within that. I know everyone is not here to necessarily learn about the grant, but wanted to learn about inclusion. So, Sue, we can reach out to you directly when we're done here.
Great, thanks.
And Tina is asking if this is the last year for the grant or will it be available next year? I am being told, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is the last year for the grant. They're offering it so the Green Acres grant will always be available, but the Jake's Law part of that, Tina, this will be the last year of 2025 will be the last year that they are going to award that.
Right, and it's a 75% matching grant, 750,000 to $1 million for counties and 500,000 to 750 from municipalities.
Right.
And so that does have to include the unitary surfacing and all those other things. But I mean, that's a great budget that you can do something pretty significant with, I would say. So super exciting opportunity.
The Jake's Law grant has really helped promote a lot of interest and excitement about putting in inclusive playgrounds. So there's been a lot of talk over the last year about what people can do. And even if you don't get the grant, there's lots of opportunities to help with funding. But there's also, even if you don't get any funding, there's ways that we can take an existing playground or design something smaller to kind of meet that criteria for inclusion. So feel free to ask any questions you have about it.
And I'll just mention again, we're going to be following up with the resources. We also have created a handout document of this presentation, and we have a recording. So feel free to share that with others, but we will get that to you after the event today.
Yeah, everyone will get a Dropbox link to a YouTube channel that'll take you to the presentation and the recording. So you'll be able to listen to it over and over and over again.
Okay.
Well, again, Bill and Jenny, thank you so much. Matt, thank you for putting this together. And thank you to Core and Playcore for helping here too. Really appreciate the materials that you guys have put together. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. And I hope everybody has a joyous holiday season. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to support you or if you have questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.